This is the Environmental Issue Group Project. This project is about the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta, Ecology and Issues by Haley Krines, Samantha Gomez, Stephen Dutcher, and Anthony Stoner. First, we're going to talk about water supply. The Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta is the largest freshwater estuary on the West Coast. It is the most crucial water source in California. It is home to the State Water Project and the Central Valley Project, two of the largest surface water delivery projects in California. The issues with the water supply are that 300% more water is allocated than gained each year. This puts a strain on groundwater supply and water quality declines. So more and more each year we're taking more and more water, and less water is going in than coming out. So that is a really big problem. We're going to talk about physical challenges. The climate change contributes to more extreme weather conditions like floods, droughts, and earthquakes. Flooding and earthquakes can cause levee failure. And before we move on, we're going to take a quick peek at this video just to give you an idea of how earthquake and levee failure and the flooding that ensues after can affect the surrounding areas. So there you go, you have your earthquake starting, and it's affecting multiple points, multiple levees. And as you start seeing, the water level rises. And this can be a big problem. Massive flooding would ensue if things like that did occur. And the interesting thing about that is most of the delta was actually floodplains, and levees were installed to help take advantage of the land for agricultural use. So over time, more and more levees were placed, more of the land was taken advantage of to create the phenom of an agricultural system we have here in California. And then droughts cause overdrawing. So every year, California seems to be more and more in a drought, and because there's less water available, I don't know why we take more away, but we keep taking more and more as less is coming in each year. So the solutions to this are tunnels, and these are costly but not viable. Levee reinforcements, which is completely possible, and flood and drought responses to stop the overdrawing in drought response. Next, we're going to talk about environmental stressors. Discharge. This includes contaminants, including salt, pesticides, metals, toxins, excessive levels of nutrients. They're harming native species by disrupting or altering ecosystems and conditions. Flow management. So flow management can change historic flow regime that supports native species, limit access to habitats, promote conditions better suited for invasive non-native species. So discharge and contaminants in the water can cause native fish species to die out, but also to migrate into areas they are not really native to. It'll push them, say, out of the delta, out of the Sacramento Delta, which is freshwater, and push them more towards the San Francisco Bay, and they start migrating into salt water, and they are not native to that kind of ecosystem. So it rushes adaptation, thus harming the species. And as you look to the right, you'll see a index or a graph, a bar graph, and it tells you about the delta smelt, which is a native species to the delta. It's an annual abundance index from 1967 to 2017. And as you can see, there's a lot of up and down. But in the last, 10 to 13 years, it has been extremely, extremely low. We're going to talk about invasive species. Invasive species can completely change the ecosystems, destroying native species and impacting the native food web. An estimated number of non-native species in the delta is between 40 and 100%. Um, this is really bad. An invasive species, like say a type of seaweed or weed that flourishes in the water, can grow in abundance, clogging up parts of the delta, pushing out fish species, and that has a cascading effect um, that is really, really bad for native species and habitat loss. Land surrounding the delta has been irreversibly altered, displacing many species. So um, we have manipulated the delta and the areas around the delta so much that we have forced a lot of native species out of their habitats, and thus, causing irreversible damage to the delta and its species. Ecosystem restoration. Restoration efforts to foster native species while reducing invasive species. Um, there are a lot of fisheries per se where they breed the specific fish like say salmon and the delta smelt to help increase population. Mitigation of water diversion. So one thing that will help is stopping the amount of water we are sending away into the Central Valley and keeping it for the native species and just to keep it for the overall health of the Delta, and tracking of successes and failures of restoration efforts and projects. That is very crucial. Um, we need to do everything we can to save the Delta, and it is worth the restoration efforts. Restoration endeavors can take decades and become costly, but are undoubtedly worth the effort. We depend so much on this delta for food because the delta supplies the Central Valley, and the Central Valley is home of California to the biggest um, agricultural, I would say, area in the United States as a whole. Um, and ecological restoration can address other pressing environmental and social causes, including equity, security, and prosperity. Thank you.